Hello, I'm David Jameson. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for the West Midlands. It's 5 minutes past 6 on Thursday, the 11th of June, 2020. Welcome to this community panel meeting, which I brought together a number of people from our community here in the West Midlands, who you'll be hearing from shortly. We're going to discuss contemporary issues, particularly those around coronavirus, and how especially those affect young people in our area. Can I thank all the panelists before we start, and also to the chair, Craig Pinkney, who in a moment will introduce himself and the panel members and start our discussion tonight. I don't think in my lifetime there's been a more significant event than coronavirus. The health issues are going to be mainly impacting older people, but the social issues are going to be mainly impacting younger people. Already thousands of people in the West Midlands have died. Tens of thousands of people are going to be losing their jobs. Economists today have predicted that in the UK we could be losing up to 10% of jobs. And I would estimate that in the West Midlands, in some areas, particularly amongst the low paid jobs, that figure could be very, very much greater than that. So that's why 2 weeks ago I published a document, the Future Generations Deal. And what that set out were my concerns about young people and how some of those young people are unemployed may then find themselves drawn into criminality. I'm also concerned about those young people in the early teens who are not going to get schooling for at least 6 months. That will affect them in the short term, in that they may be victim of gangs like County Lines and get them selling drugs. But in the medium to longer term, those youngsters are going to be disadvantaged when they hit the labour market in a year or so's time. If we don't take action and do something now, I think we could have a summer of disruption and worse going into the autumn and the winter. I have said in my document that we're sort of sitting on a time bomb, a social time bomb. If I could just say a few words as well about issues that have been going on more recently. The protests that we've seen here and abroad since George Floyd's appalling and dreadful killing on the 25th of May 2020 remind us that racism, discrimination and racial inequality are real, both in the UK and abroad. Structural inequality blights the lives of many Black and Asian people. Our nation's history is controversial and complex, and at the same time as we remember the D-Day invasion to free Western Europe from fascism, we also reflect on the legacy of slavery, injustice and inequality that is woven into the country that we have become. George Floyd's killing has reminded many of personal experience of unfairness, maltreatment, and has made fresh these difficult and traumatic memories. We cannot write those off as historic anomalies. And I would say to people, the Windrush scandal is from our own time, our generation, and it is our responsibility now. Now, I want to stand with those who want to see policing that has the confidence of everyone. I stand with those who want to see an end of inequality, the lack of opportunity, structural prejudice, and poor social mobility that blight our country and our community here in the West Midlands. These are not issues that divide us by ethnicity or gender, and they should not be allowed to do so. And that's why in my Future Generations Deal paper, I've addressed these issues as affecting all. The urge from some people will be to tear down and destroy, but I don't want anger and revenge to guide us in our present society. I want to see us come together to recreate and build a new society that will emerge out of this present crisis. There are questions that I have to ask myself, and we all have to ask ourselves. Are we doing enough to address the issues that undermine public confidence in the police and criminal justice system? Do the police and the partners, do they build networks of allies across communities? Is our neighbourhood engagement proactive rather than just driven by crisis response? Do our officers have the cultural competence to police hyper-diverse populations and challenge racism? Does our training give them these skills, informed by the lived experience, who have seen policing at its very best, but also seen it at its worst? And do we involve the community enough in our senior appointments process, both in policing and partner agencies? And are our complaints processes working well? And do we do enough to understand what drives and leads to officer misconduct and failure in the criminal justice system? I'm also asking other questions as well. Why are we asking police officers to be the frontline response to people with mental health issues? Why are the police dealing with children who are being let down by the care system and becoming ensnared in county lines? Why are the consequences of school exclusions and off-rolling, both of which lead to youth violence, made to be a police problem? Why is it the police are having to cope with the homeless crisis and the street begging? And why do we think that more officers, more laws, more security will stop a small number of people in Britain becoming so disaffected they reject our values and become radicalized and into violent extremism? Drugs misuse is a huge public health challenge, and yet the inadequate national response leaves response officers, yes, police response officers in Birmingham, administering naloxone to overdosing heroin addicts. I'd add in low wages, the gig economy, the 0 hours contracts, ballooning personal debt are driving the hard-pressed into crime, where short custodial sentences continue to create a downward spiral of lost opportunity and failure. All of these challenges require a system-wide response rather than just police reform. Policing is a product of the society we have created. You don't fix society by fixing policing. It works the other way round. Now, we have an opportunity in the coming months and years to do something with our police force and reshape it. In the next 3 years, we will be appointing in the region of 3,000 new officers to our force. I want those officers to reflect the diverse communities that we have in the West Midlands. We've made good headway in this respect, but I want us to see us do more, and I want us to see our communities, or all our diverse communities, fully represented in the work that we do. It's only by doing that, have a police force that is actually representative of the people, can we affect that change and build what we all want to do is a better and decent society. I'm going to stop there, Craig. Those are my thoughts. Those are my personal thoughts that you could see I feel very passionately about. But I'm now going to hand over to Craig to introduce himself and to introduce our panel members today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, and good evening all and everybody that is watching in on today's panel discussion. So just as a formal introduction, my name is Craig Pinkney. I'm a criminologist, urban youth specialist and director at SOLVE, the Centre for Youth Violence and Conflict. So today's conversation, I think, is really poignant because with what's going on nationally and internationally around injustice, I think it's a perfect time to have a conversation about some of the issues that are faced by young people, families, communities, and the wider society about issues that impact our children, young people, and their families. So what we have today is a series of panelists. Now, I'm sure you can imagine for those that are watching, there's loads of people that we could have contacted to be involved in today's panel discussion. So this is just a touch and a kind of insight into the different ideas, perspectives of people of difference that want to join our conversation and talk about some key issues. I'm not going to talk too much, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of say is the reason why I guess agreed to chair this meeting this evening is because with all that's been going on recently in the news and some of the things that we're hearing about in our society, it really kind of agrees me to know that we're still having this conversation about injustice, about prejudice, about systematic systems that impact us as a people. And I think, as I said in the beginning, that this is a real timely conversation about what needs to be done. So today's conversation, and I'm also now going to introduce the panelists, today's discussion, I want it to not just necessarily be a talk shop, but to state what some of the key fundamental issues are, but also talk about solutions. And then whilst we have those conversations about solutions, it's important that we start them thinking about what are the challenges and the limitations to achieve our desired goals if we want freedom, justice, and equality. And most importantly, what does that look like? So hopefully from the conversation this evening, we will try and ascertain what that looks like and how we're going to achieve it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce everybody that is tuned in online to observe our panel members. Each panel member is going to have about 2 to 3 minutes max to introduce themselves. And then secondly, what I want as the chair, for them to state what do they hope to achieve from today's meeting. And then once they finish, we're going to then move on to the next panelist speaker. And then at the end, we're going to go straight into the conversation about some of the issues. And then hopefully we should have some fruitful conversations. So I'm going to say the names in order so everybody is aware. So we're going to start with Marie-Claire is going to go first. And then we're going to go to George. Then we're going to go to Cameron. Then we're going to go to Paulette. Then we're going to go to Kit. Then we're going to go to Malvin. And then we'll come back together, and then I will start to fire off some questions about some key issues and points that people want to make. So, Marie-Claire, if you want to go first.
Thanks, Craig. Pleasure to be here this evening and be invited to speak as part of the panel. My name is Marie-Claire O'Brien, and I run the New Leaf Initiative, which I founded almost 6 years ago now. And we specialise in prison to employment, so helping people with convictions from a variety of backgrounds to access tangible education, training and work opportunities, because we know that if somebody is in work, they're almost 50% less likely to reoffend. Less reoffending means less victims, and that's what we're all concerned with here today. As I said, we've been going for about 6 years. We've supported over 500 individuals intensively through mentoring, one-to-one relationships. Again, we use relationships because we know that that's what works in terms of desistance and reducing recidivism, the committing of crime. So we use people, we don't use people, but we engage and employ people with lived experience of the criminal justice system. So myself, I was in prison 13 years ago, gave me a unique insight into the many, many barriers, systemic barriers, as Craig mentioned, that people face when they're trying to go straight. I'm sure that some of the listeners would think that that's a simple decision. You either go straight or you don't. And I think what we're here today is just to shed a light on the fact that that isn't the case. We've supported hundreds more in prisons. And the reason that we started the New Leaf Initiative is because we did some research at probation. And I spoke personally to over 400 people on probation licenses from a range of ethnicities and backgrounds, who all said the same thing. We were asking the question of what support have you been lacking? Why are you here? What do you need to get out of this situation? And the resounding feedback was, we want people like you that we can relate to, that have got an insight into the issues that we face, and also who can act as role models to kind of inspire us and help us to reach our goals. And actually what we also need are tangible opportunities. So not just lots of CV writing, not just lots of employability, but, you know, real pathways into employment, which is what we've created in the West Midlands. We've managed to get about 78% of our service users into further educational training, and we're getting about 35 to 40% into employment. So great outcomes. But one of the things that we're always concerned about is the other 60%. The people that aren't being employed, the people that are still socially isolated, and the people that are probably reoffending. I'm here today to hopefully share some of my expertise on that, you know, the employment and how we can create these tangible opportunities for people, for the communities that we're speaking about. We've got some innovative models that I'd like to discuss and bounce around. And the things that I'd really like to see, I think we've all been profoundly affected by not just what's going on globally in terms of the pandemic and, you know, all working in a detached way and remotely, but also what's obviously gone on with George Floyd and the subsequent movement around Black Lives Matter. I employ people that have been affected by these issues. One of our staff members' husbands was stopped and searched just recently and made a complaint about that. So it's a subject close to our hearts, and if we can be part of the solution, then we'll happily give our time and energy to do so. But yeah, thanks for having me here.
Okay, so the next person, I believe, is George.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks for having me as part of the panel today. My name's George Kearney, so I am a regional manager for Envision. Envision is a social mobility youth charity. So we work with young people from kind of disadvantaged areas of Birmingham, kind of high deprivation areas where there is a risk that those young people may go into kind of youth crime and violence in the future, or be at high risk of NEETs and lacking social confidence and skills for the future. We work with those young people to engage them in a positive alternative. So thinking about things that they can practically do and get involved in their communities through social action projects that are really going to help benefit themselves and their local communities, but also by developing their own skills. So it's all very well them doing kind of nice things for others, but we really want to kind of increase their opportunities for the future. Through the work that we do, we kind of partner up schools and we partner up businesses within the city to actually provide kind of volunteer role models and give young people insights into the world of work. So it's really kind of looking at various different aspects around community, around kind of individual skills development, and also developing that link to employment for the future. Over in Birmingham, we work with around 300 young people over a year. And have worked in the region for about kind of the last 15 years. So we're really proud of the work that we've been able to kind of do to help develop young people's skills and help give them positive options for the future. And really just get them involved and give them a stake in their local communities. I think for me, in terms of this conversation today, and I think it goes back to something you were saying, Craig, it's like, why are we still having to talk about this? We are constantly, I feel, you know, we are a group of fantastic community providers in the West Midlands. I think there's amazing people out there doing amazing things, but we're still talking about it. And what I really want to see out of today is a clear kind of action plan of how we're going to move forward, how we actually going to drive forward change. Because young people, I think, are sick of us talking about it, sick of not feeling like they are part of the solution and that they are just the problem. And I think we need to think about that in a different way. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the solutions that come out of this conversation and how we can kind of drive that forward for young people in the region.
Okay, thank you for doing that. I'm going to move on to the next person. But again, just bear in mind for our panelists, all I'm asking for is just your introduction of who you are, and just quickly then to the state who you represent and what you hope to get from today. Save the meaty part for the next part of the conversation, and I will allow you all to speak. But I just want the audience just to know who's on the panel at this stage, okay? So the next person, I believe, is Cameron.
Hi, Craig and Commissioner and everyone else. Thanks, excellent program. My name is Cameron Shazad. I'm from the Bahu Trust, which is a faith-based organization in Walsall Heath. What am I hoping to get out of today? I suppose ditto to what the previous two panelists have said, but also, whilst it probably sounds like a cliche, is just to ensure that we have the frank conversations around what are the issues facing us here in the West Midlands and the solutions. But you mentioned earlier that this shouldn't be a talking shop, but it does need to be a listening shop where we listen to and take on board everything that's been said, and that then needs to translate into something more tangible and actionable.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Cameron. Paulette, you're next. Can we take Paulette off mute?
I've muted myself. Good evening, Craig. My name's Paulette Hamilton. I am a councillor in a ward called Holyhead. I'm a Labour Party councillor, I may as well say that. And also I'm the cabinet member for adult social care and health and public health. And I've been leading as a politician for Birmingham around the issues around COVID-19. Now, I always say to people, we've had many issues in the city, and one person, does not get things sorted out. It's a team effort. So I have been very much, I've had a team around me. There's a team of us that have been doing a lot of the work in that area. Tonight, when I was asked to do tonight, it's not normally the type of thing I do, but I'm angry. And Craig, you've known me for a number of years, and I've dealt with things around mental health. Windrush came along and hit us. We had the stuff with COVID-19. There's stuff with the kids that are not happy with the police at the moment because they just don't trust them. And then we've got the stuff with Black Lives Matters. I feel as if we're in the middle of a tsunami. And we need to pull out the key issues. And for me tonight, you're not going to solve the problems, but you need to know what the 2 or 3 key issues are that you can take away the police force and others, because the police force can't do it on their own. The city council can't do it on their own. The health service can't do it on their own. We have to work as a system because young people don't trust us. They don't believe we've got their best interest at heart, and they don't believe we understand what they're going through. I can say I'm from the previous generation, and my generation were told to put up or shut up. The younger ones aren't going to do this. So we've got to change the way we do things, or they are going to take it by force. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Paulette. Kit, I believe that you're next. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me. My name's Kit. I'm the director of Aspire for You. I'll probably start with where I hope this panel goes. I think this is the first of many, and I hope that the very, very next ones are all about young people, where they do the speaking and we just sit around the edges and listen. I think some of the next ones also need to be more than just one, in all honesty. If we kind of look at all the regions of the West Midlands, we need to do this again and again and again. And we can't get tired of listening, because the years of anger, the accumulation, and the different directions of where the world is going, we need to work harder. Aspire for You, we care about 3 things: how the brain works, so mindset development, helping people to understand enough about money in order to survive or even move forward, and all about employability. Employability for us isn't just about having a job, but it's about finding one's use. To employ something is to make use of it. So we believe that if we can help people understand more about how to think straight, navigate their lives, manage the money parts, then the rest is all about finding your place in this world. We support social enterprises to do exactly the same thing. A lot of small organizations are not as well branded, so they don't get into rooms like this, and I think we need to correct that as well. So I'm hoping that we have those conversations, and we need to also talk about like representation across ethnicities, lifestyles, because there's over 1 million young people in our region, so we've got work to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Kit. So we've got one more of our panelists. Malvin, I want to bring you in, and then we're going to go into the main part of the discussion, and then I'm going to set the tone. So Malvin, if you'd like to quickly just introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Melvin. I'm one of 2 representatives for the Youth Police Crime Commission from Wolverhampton. I think the takeaway that I would like to take from this is, I feel like we all know the issues that are facing young Black people, or Black people in general. And I feel like we need to actually put something in place and work with a lot of organizations to help young Black people to get where they need to get, instead of all this systematic racism that they're facing. Let's try and put something in place that will help them move forward, and so everyone can feel like they're treated equally. That's my takeaway. Thank you.
Excellent, and thank you, panelists, for giving me your time and the audience that are viewing us online the opportunity to know who you are. So what I want to do now is open into the main part of the discussion, and I've heard some of the key things that people came with, and the key words that came for me was, I like the idea of a tsunami, and one of the other things that came up was this idea about listening and understanding the youth, which just came from Kit. So what I want to ask the panelists, and I know it's kind of side to what we already agreed, is if you can think about what you believe is the key issue. And one of the key issues, and I'll just start and talk about, is that we know that there's issues of unemployment. We know that there's issues around mental health. We know that there's an issue around homelessness. We know that there's issues around domestic violence, self-harming, suicide, depression, anxiety amongst young people. There's a growing issue, especially in COVID-19, around young people being exploited in all forms, whether that be to do with gangs, whether that to do with issues around county lines. One of the key things that's now starting to come out, and I think it's been a historical conversation with some of the stuff that Paulette's just mentioned, is this idea about race. And oftentimes when we have these panel discussions, we oftentimes don't address the elephant in the room and talking about race. And whilst we are looking at a global and national conversation about race, I think it's important and poignant that we kind of look at that in relation to young people. So I want to ask a question, and the question that I'm asking is on the topic of race and racism. How do we get our children and young people involved? How do we get young people to understand the elephant in the room? And what I want to do now is give the panelists an opportunity to just think about that question. And then I want to get there, and then I want to open it out to talking about some more discussions. So I'm just going to state it again for the audience that are tuned in. We know what the current issues are within our current society, but one of the things that we don't talk about enough is the topic and the subject of race. So the question is, how do we get our children and young people involved in discussions and topics about race? And I want to allow the panelists to share their thoughts around this subject, if I may. So what I am going to do again is I'm going to now pick people at random. So what I want to start with, if you don't mind, is Kit, for you to go first.
Yeah, I think the two main things that I definitely can't explain in over my, like working in over 100 schools. I'm going to start left field first and really say that we still don't spend enough time teaching any human about their own brains and how the mind works. So you get born, you go through this thing called life till the age of 18, and then you get told to go figure it out. And all along those journeys, you're going to learn about other people's history. You're going to learn a lot of other techniques that apparently give you a job, etc. But no one's going to help you understand how you work. You can't then have in-depth discussions about your own identity, and you can't speak well or articulately or maybe even analyze some of all the complex histories of diverse races in this country, as well as those with mixed heritage. And I am actually speaking with a lot of mixed heritage young people in mind, because that's one of the most poignant sort of voices that's ringing true to me now, that we are building, or a country's being built, and some of the young people don't really know where their place is. And I genuinely think that if we're going to have difficult conversations, we need to know how the brain works, how it receives hard conversations, how we need to know how to understand something in therapy and counseling about understanding what's somebody else's piece and what's your piece. And sometimes all the emotionality gets kind of wound up and kind of confused. So if we're going to start anything around complex conversations, you need to be really starting people off about exactly knowing enough about listening, really good quality listening. And if you're going to articulate, try and move from problems into solutions in that order. The last sort of part that I think is also around policymakers. Young people know exactly what they want, what they need. Yes, some need shaping and etc. But it's then too long and too far apart to get into these types of rooms. If we really do care, we need to invest in that, help people really have that ability to analyze and articulate themselves. And when they're ready, they need to be in these rooms, in these spaces, and then we need to listen and show them all the constructs, all the tools available to make it happen.
Thank you for that, Keith. Okay, I want to go to George next. What are your thoughts about that question about children and young people and the topic of race?
Yeah, so I think, with everything, it starts early. So I think it really comes back to this idea around education, around making curriculums that are representative of young people that are actually in those areas, studying in those schools, and allowing a really safe space for young people to actually be able to ask questions that others may consider, difficult or irrelevant, and really have the opportunity to learn from each other. I think if we had a more kind of open approach to that, and young people could understand kind of each other's cultures, each other's traditions, each other's backgrounds, and understand why they feel the way they feel about, various different things, and that is represented through our education system, and our education system allows for that, I think it would create a much more kind of harmonious community.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice and short and succinct. Mary Claire, can you go next, please, on the conversation about race as it relates to our children and young people?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we're passionate about as an organisation is like asking people, speaking to people, rather than prescribing kind of solutions that we come up with in our ivory towers, actually speaking to the people that are going to potentially benefit from such services, because I think we make mistakes in thinking that they don't know the solutions that they want and need. So I think just, asking them questions about what do you want? What does good look like? What's your personal experience been like, and how can we help to counter that, whether it be negative connotations with the police, or living in deprived areas and a lack of opportunity. Just really kind of getting to the crux of the matter and allowing them a platform to kind of explore the solutions as they see them. And I think that's another thing that we find in terms of the service users that kind of come to us and come into our offices. The environment that we engage people, especially young people, is really important. So, for example, if you're in a corporate office that feels really clinical, that's really professional, everyone's suited and booted, it's not really welcoming, it's not potentially seen as an inclusive environment for the people that you're trying to engage. So sometimes it's about going to people in their own, communities, neighbourhoods, wherever they are, and going to them rather than expecting them to come to you, because they are disenfranchised. I hate the term hard to reach. I don't think anybody's hard to reach. I just don't think we're packaging the solutions or asking the right questions to the right people. So, for example, I've seen some really good work from some of the smaller social enterprises around recording studios and, giving the youth a means to, Paulette, you said it, you're angry, giving people a platform to kind of express that anger that's potentially more positive than what we're seeing with some of the protests at the moment, which is anger coming out sideways, understandably. So yeah, just kind of analysing the platforms, giving people different platforms and different environments to do that exploration.
Okay, thank you very much. Malvin, do you want to comment on the topic of race? What do you think we should be doing to include our young people and children in this debate? Can someone unmute Malvin, please?
Oh, hello. I think we live in a society where when we talk about race, it's such a taboo subject. And to be able, when I've grown up, I've had to teach myself about my own history. And the school curriculum doesn't make us feel included. It whitewashes the history of England. And they don't really show the true side of how England really has done a lot to a lot of people's cultures and race. So I think we need to change the history curriculum so people can be comfortable and ask questions about why England did this, what can we do? And in schools, have the conversations in normal lessons about race, ask questions, where are you from? Why do you do this in your culture? Because I feel like it's an awkward thing to ask. And this is the point when we start growing up in a society, when we pass 18, if we keep that mindset about not teaching young people about where we're from, everyone's still gonna have that mindset, oh, we don't talk about race, we just leave it as it is, and then change doesn't come from that. So I really feel like for us to be included, we need to have these conversations in primary school, teach them about the actual history England was doing to people in Africa, India. Like the whole thing in London about Winston Churchill, I know it's a very taboo subject, but Winston Churchill was a great man, but the things he did to people don't know about, and the deemed as a hero, but we need to know the true history, why people reacted in a way the other day, spray painting his statue in London. We need to have a true understanding and teach young people what really needs to happen.
Excellent. Thank you, Melvin. Cameron, I'm going to ask you to come in, and then Paulette, I want you to finish before I ask the next question.
Thanks, Craig. I think, first of all, I want to endorse what Marie-Claire said around hard to reach. I hate that term. It should be called you don't know how to reach, because it's quite often used as an excuse. But moving on, I believe we have a huge issue in this country around allowing our young people to explore their own identity, their own heritage, their own background, their own history. Our young people don't always know, or they don't understand where they're from, what their culture is, so they're born and bred here. But because the discourse around identity is so toxic, it constantly feels like they've been told that they don't belong, because the media or politics, we hate the Europeans, we hate the Scots, we hate Middle Eastern countries. There's all sorts of issues going around. And I think this has a massive impact on our young people and identity. Same within schools. You feel more British if you understand how much effort your ancestors put into building their country. They're not taught about these things. Melvin just mentioned it's whitewashed. They're not taught about the role of the Commonwealth, of the Indians, of the Africans, of the Caribbeans in fighting against evil around. And I think we have to allow young people to identify with and be proud of what identity they have. And if they don't know where they belong, if they're going to struggle to take ownership of their community because they don't feel part of that community, because they're constantly told, you do not belong, you do not belong. I mean, we shouldn't be having this discussion about race. Why are we still having this discussion? How many times have we had Black Lives Matter movements? It's not the first, it's not nothing new, but we're still having the same conversations over and over again. So I just feel we need to allow young people to explore their identity freely.
Excellent, thank you. Paula, if you can finish off with the last response.
Right, mine is going to be a simple response. I'm going to flip it on its head. Young people, not all young people don't have a clue. I listen to a lot of podcasts and things that young people are now going away and producing. They are going out there and they're finding out. We've got more young people than ever that's going to university. There's a small proportion that unfortunately they are truly, truly struggling. But we've got lots of children that are doing well. But in our institutions, how are they being reflected in there? You talk about racism, little comments that are made that chip away at you as a young person. So you're trying hard, but then you're told, not that you're not good enough, but everything you get overlooked for. So somebody highlighted the policymakers. If the policymakers don't look like me, have not had my sort of lived experience, have not had any sort of struggles that I've struggled, how are they going to make the policies that reflect me? So part of the issues here is to flip it on the head and to look at the people that are actually making the policies at the moment and actually saying to them, this isn't good enough, and drawing them out, because we're expecting young people to do the job for them. It's not fair, because they have it hard. And this is a city, Birmingham, and this is my last point. Birmingham is a city with over 70% young people. How are they reflected in the institutions? How are they being reflected in the system? How are they being reflected in the employment statistics? We've got to start saying, stop putting the responsibility on, we've got to teach. Young people now are starting to go out there and starting to teach themselves. And the issue is, are they learning the right things? Because the systems are not in place because of structural racism. The systems are not in place for us to guide them into the positions they need to be in. Young people, when they come and I mentor them, because, normally I tell people I'm 21 and a half, but clearly that's not true. And I mentor them. They cannot believe how easygoing I am. Because at the end of the day, they always believe if you're in a position of power, you are this person that's untouchable, unapproachable, and you cannot do anything. But they have to have access. They have to be able to go in and see that you have the same issues as they have. So I have flipped it on the head, and I'm just saying to you, start thinking, what can the institutions do to change themselves so that young people feel as if they can be included? And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that, Paula. And I think that just kind of brings it into the conversation that I want to talk about as it relates to solutions, because the key thing that we've identified here from the respondents is that we know that identity is a key issue, allowing young people to be in safe spaces as well, to explore their identity and the identity of others. But I think there's also a key thing as well to also recognize that our young people currently are becoming more politicized, are understanding the systems and the structures that are adversely impacting them in a range of different ways. And I think part of the problem is that we as a society, and many of us, don't understand what racism is. We've for far too long understood racism to be a thing of just prejudice, people just mistreating and calling people only on the basis of skin color. And now what we're starting to recognize, and especially the youth, they're recognizing that it's not just about prejudice, it's also about power. And the idea and the fact that individuals utilize their power in order to adversely impact the lives of people from specific backgrounds. So one of the key things that I think Paulette was just highlighting is when we're talking about institutions, when we're talking about disproportionality, people are not reflected in the same way as those on the ground that are calling and asking for freedom, justice, equality, and change. So when we're talking about solutions now, this is where I want to kind of bring the panel in. I really want to talk about what do solutions look like, because we have an audience that's watching us. And again, as I said in the beginning, people are far too long have said that these things are just talk shops. And I'm also about accountability and also action plans and strategies to move forward from these discussions. So one of the things I really want to just focus on now is the solutions based on some of the key things that we've been talking about, where that's to do with young people and their issues during COVID-19. Young people facing a range of issues around some of the tensions, and also as it relates to some of those systems and the structures that people have mentioned, what does change ultimately look like? So that's the question. Solution-based, what does change look like? And I think that's how we want to go forward. So this is where now Craig is going to be really, really tight now with the time. So if I feel that people are going on too long, I am just going to cut and move on, because I really want to give people the opportunity to state their point. So I really want you to get straight to the point. I don't want you to talk no more about issues, solutions, and some of the points. I don't need reflections either. Just get straight to the point. So at this point now, what I want to do now is I want to pick people again at random. David, did you want to make a point at this point in terms of solutions and what you would hope to see from this?
I'll think of one solution that I think is important, and it's somebody else has partly alluded to this as well. I think Kit, you mentioned it. Years ago, I was a schoolmaster in inner city schools in around the country. You know, what I see now is a lot of young people coming into our office to do work experience. What I see is absolutely great people, all the diverse communities. I see really good people, enthusiastic, want to get on, want to do things, want to achieve. But, you know, I look, and this is not a criticism of the teachers, and I think many of the teachers are truly excellent, but the curriculum is so narrow and so exclusive to that thinking about other people that it actually holds them back. So what they're not used to doing is we get them to work as a team with somebody else. They don't do that. We've never done that before. I work on my own. I put my own project in, but that's not what the world's like. It's not what work is like. So I think that's seriously lacking now in our schools, and that has got substantially worse than when I left the classroom 20 odd years ago. We've got to free up the curriculum to allow children to be thinking more about themselves, their own history, where they're coming from, and to develop themselves as human beings. What we're doing is we're grad grind style, trying to pour facts into their heads rather than give them ideas they can take through their life. Just one other thing as well, and very difficult to say this without sounding patronizing, but I've taken on some youth commissioners who, about over a dozen of them, each of the areas, and Melvin is one of them. They have actually made a difference to our thinking. One of the commissioners about 3 or 4 years ago said we should have police cadets, which we didn't have. He actually wrote the document. He was 15 at the time. He's now a special constable. He's nearly 20 now. You know, and what struck me is that the ideas that came from that younger group of people that freshen up people like me. I don't think like that anymore, but I do need other people who think like that. I mean, I've got to the stage in my life where I know what I don't know. And you know, there's a lot I don't know, a lot I don't understand. But it's actually getting people in who do understand that. And Melvin and others, a very diverse group, have given some really good insights into policing and into young people and how we should change. I think that's where we need to go. So it's schools and the curriculum, and I think involving young people more, as you said, Paulette, in decision making.
Excellent. And I think it makes sense then that I go straight over to Melvin then. So we're talking about solutions, again, just to repeat to everyone. So when we're talking about solutions and change, if there's one thing that you think that we should be thinking about moving forward as it relates to solutions, what do you believe one of those ideas could be?
For me, I think the main solution really is educating all races in schools about history, so you can learn from that, so you can humble yourself when it comes to having certain conversations. So definitely in the curriculum, teach about British history the right way, not the whitewashed way. And being able to have them conversations in classrooms, so having open PSHE classes on human rights, civil rights movement, just key things that were important to all races that changed how we think today. So I think there needs to be more emphasis on our education system in terms of how Black people are treated, well, all people of color are treated, and what we're learning in terms of that. So yeah, definitely. Thank you.
So just to make that clear, so we're talking about radical changes within the education system and how they teach our children and young people of different things that may be in history, science, and math. And I would also add that it's not just located in 1 month throughout the year.
Yeah,
people have those conversations, and I just think that's really, really important. So what I want to do next is I want to go to Kit, because I haven't seen Kit for years myself. And I remember doing a program many years ago with Kit inside a school. I can't remember what school it was, but I think that, Kit, if you could just kind of bring in terms of solutions, as I said, we haven't seen each other for a while. I just want to see where the thinking is at, in terms of what do you think or see needs to move forward. Before you start, your mic's on mute, so if you can just go ahead with that.
So yeah, just a quick reference to what you were kind of talking about and linking in with Melvin. So I'm currently the leadership course trainer for the young commissioner. So there are over 13 young people that are representing the different parts of the Midlands, and my job is to start to show them and teach them how leadership in their own communities work, particularly against campaigns. I'm a big believer in experiential learning, and the program that you came on for us, Craig, was around experiential learning, where we were showing young people live debate skills, and we brought in, I think, over 16 practitioners. Other programs that we do are about showing young people how to actually manage and handle things by putting on an experience, or putting on your own music events, put on your own drama, dance events. More recently, it's actually about networking. So we're trying to show young people that the power in seeing each other as assets, not as competition. So wherever you think you're repping, let's show you how to put on your own arts event, come and connect with a graphic designer, connect with this next talent. And I think that those platforms are where the next generation of learning can come from. Because when we start to think about race and identity, the truth is that actually in this, we still have to be global. And in that global kind of awareness means that we've got to work together and integrate without compromising or without being ashamed of our own personal identity. You know what I mean? That there's a room for all of us on earth. And it's the quicker we get to finding where our purpose is, the quicker we can get collaborations going, etc. So from kind of where Melvin and yourself are going, a lot of my conversation is really the solutions in true hard work. And I do believe in everyone that I've seen working in a lot of local authorities and the Police and Crime Commissioner, but I would say that we still need 10% more, 20% more, 50% more. There's a lot of hard, intense work going, but it still needs to continue. And I also think that the small organizations and the social enterprises need to step up. My biggest shock was through COVID-19 that some people's operations literally stopped. And I think for me, a phone call or Wi-Fi is free. Like, you know what I mean? Just because government money might not be coming through doesn't mean that your heart and mind stop thinking about the young people. So I do think that sometimes there are people hiding in roles and hiding behind roles. And if we are genuinely all around young people, we need to work hard. Everyone in my team knows that we do a 7-day-a-week thing, because if you want a better world, it's not going to happen at you. And then I think that links with visibility of officials. I think that there's a massive diversity in the PCC, especially, and it's not really seen. So I think that we need to welcome and try and almost create a culture that allows people to be seen, because I think a lot of public roles, because of the way criticism works, sometimes everyone's trying to be careful with the PR, but I actually think we need to celebrate that diversity that we see within the role organizations that are doing things. And then the last bit is just utilizing culture. Like has been mentioned, young people are teaching themselves a lot of things online, but I think actually that we're a little bit lazy about not getting to the propagandists first. I think there's a lot of people using and misusing certain historical facts. They weave it together and then create a whole new narrative. And like I say, no one's taught us how the brain works. So it's very easy for someone to put 3 facts together, but then create a whole different manifestation, etc. So I'm a big believer in we've got to get behind supporting our own YouTube channels, supporting a lot of like understanding culture. Look at what TikTok's doing. Look at all these platforms. There is no barrier for any local authority, any government body to literally start to get in there and start to put the truth out. And same with curriculum. Like we can develop and create our own curriculums now. We don't need your Pearsons, etc. There's a lot of room for us to work with current culture to get inside mindsets and support people to move forward.
All right, thank you, Kit. I want to bring in George, and then I'm going to bring in Paulette to talk about some stuff after. So George, you want to take the mic?
Yeah, I'm keep it fairly concise. So I think I kind of echo a lot of things that have already been said. I think there is a real need for kind of experiential learning through practical experiences to actually develop skills and develop opportunities for the future. I think that's really important. It doesn't happen enough in the standalone curriculum, and we have to create more opportunities that allow young people to learn in that way. And I think we actually have to create and work with organisations to understand that this is a shared responsibility. It's not just the issue of the public sector or the third sector, but the corporate and the private sector play a really key part in actually improving the lives of young people in the future. And I think getting those individuals and those corporates within the Birmingham, within the West Midlands, to actually have a real stake in what we can do for young people in the future will be really key. And linked to that, it's about giving young people actual experiences. So a week's work experience is great, but what's next? Like, where does that lead on to? How do we get young people into the workplace where they're actually paid, where they are actually kind of getting some sort of payment for the time they're doing, and they're actually being supported in kind of being embedded into the workplace. They're getting that support and they feel like they belong in that place. And then my last point was really kind of echoing David's around, it's really important we involve young people in these things. We can't speak on their behalf. We need to get those young youth voices kind of to play a really key role in decision making moving forward.
Excellent, thank you for that. Paulette, I want to bring you in, and then after Paulette, I'm going to bring Mary Claire in, and then end with Cameron.
Can I'm going to flip it on the head again, because you've asked me to come on, so you want me to say as it is. I'm going to talk about economics. I'm a politician. Now, within our communities, If you look in the Black community, I read somewhere that finances circulate in the Black community for 6 hours. Finances circulate in the Asian community for something like 7 days. It circulates in the Jewish community for 28 days. When you're always at the bottom of the rung, when you cannot have any economic power, sometimes people struggle, and I'm not going to say sometimes, people struggle to take you seriously. And as a community, even when you talk about the BAME communities, but then you look at what's happening within the African and Caribbean community, and you have a look at what's happening in the others, the differences between the different communities are stark, and politicians are sometimes the worst because they say they're addressing the issues, but they truly aren't. And a really good example of this was Matt Hancock. He was asked on a meeting, how many Black people do you have in the cabinet? And he was trying to, we've got two people. They weren't Black. The presenter had to draw him in. The issue here is people try to water it down, read the communities that are struggling most. Now, if you want to pick them up off the floor, all communities, you have to recognize who's actually on the floor and why they're fighting. And I'll stop there. There you go, Craig.
Thank you very much for that. I believe, sorry, I'm just looking at my thing, Marie-Claire.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what everybody's said, to be honest with you. I think the opening doors is essential, as we're really lucky in Birmingham to have a PCC, and I'm not just saying this because they're listening in, but actually I think you're really innovative in the way that you do get lived experience, you know, right at the top of the tree, kind of supporting you to make decisions. And clearly that's still going on with the youth commissioners, so you're to be applauded for that. And I think we need to see that across the board. So what I'd like to see as a solution are diverse boards, diverse decision making bodies that include these young people that we're so keen to talk about but don't actually involve in the discussion. Leadership apprenticeships, things like that, you know, tangible pathways to positions of power, which are automatically going to redress the power dynamics, because as you mentioned earlier, Craig, that's what it's about. So I think the theme running through a lot of the solutions that people are talking about is we need hope. Kids need hope, because we've heard words like anger being thrown about, and I think there's also a lot of apathy about, you know, like somebody said earlier, how many Black Lives Matter protests are we going to have to take part in before something changes? And I think, you know, the only thing that counters that is hope. I think that sharing good news stories around engaging people from diverse backgrounds is really important in the media. And I also think we need to challenge the media and hold them to account on the messaging, on the disgraceful messaging that they are spreading. So for instance, somebody commits a crime from a BAME community, that's the header, that's what they lead with: Pakistani man, Asian group, Black men. You know, we don't do that when white people commit crimes. It's just a crime. So we really need to put pressure on the media who are sending out disgraceful messaging to not just our youth but our whole communities, and also tangible opportunities. Most crime, whether it be violent crime or you know, just acquisitive crime, is driven by economics, that they're economic drivers. So without equitably valuing young people through to adults, we're not giving them any choices. We're kind of forcing them down a path of, you know, things that we don't want them to do. So we really need to open up, as I know David's focused on, how do we increase tangible opportunities which equitably value people.
Excellent, and thank you for that. Cameron, I want to bring you in now in terms of solutions. Then I want to make a point and then bring David in to talk about his new deal as it relates to young people. Cameron.
Yeah, I've heard the word representation mentioned quite a lot, and everyone's right on it. But quite often we forget, like for instance, we're talking about young people. How many young people do we have on this panel? One. out of quite a few of us. And it's not a dig at the organizers, and because we're allowed to have, we're talking about this, but we also, as participants and panel members, also don't question that. We just get on with it. So it's important to make sure we put our money where our mouth is. And I know the PCC's office is generally very good, but we need to push that in other organizations and other statutory authorities to make sure that they genuinely have representation. But also, I think one of the solutions also needs to be sometimes toning our language down. And we know Black and ethnic minority, their education and literacy rates are normally quite lower than others. So when we call young people into meetings or we do consultations, sometimes it's so complicated for them that they don't understand. And I know from staff member here at the Bahu Trust who work with young people, you'd be surprised how many young people cannot read and write really well. And so it's been a huge disadvantage for these young people to take part in activities. And Paulette mentioned economic power. I believe that language power is also important. We need to train our young people to be able to speak well, to be able to articulate themselves well, to be able to write well, so that they can push and portray their views without them losing confidence. Because the systems let them down, they're not able to do it. So that's why this hard to reach that we call quite often don't have the confidence because they feel they can't talk properly or they don't understand everything that's being thrown at them.
Thank you, Cameron, for doing that. And just to kind of mention as well that the PCC are actually having a dedicated youth panel on the 25th of June. We can send out details about that. And I just wanted to say, thanks to everybody to make their points. And time is fleeting, and there's so many conversations that we can talk about. From the points that was made about education, economics, politics, and more so just kind of emotional intelligence of the people. And I think that whilst we're having these conversations and those that are observing online, I really want us to think about moving forward, what are those changes are. And when we talk about kind of systems, and everyone's kind of mentioned that, that there's the foundation ultimately is scarred. And it's about what do we want to see in terms of our futures in our country as it relates to children and young people, and ensuring that, they have the opportunity to make the best choices possible. And I think what kind of leads to that, before I just allow David to have a conversation quickly about his plan in relation to young people, is many of us side of being professionals and got our different hats on tonight. We're parents, we're uncles, we're aunties, we're grandparents, we're children, and we see and hear the pain of, families and communities nationally, globally about these issues. And whilst we have these professional hats, the reality is I've got to go home and talk to my children about some of these key issues happening in society. And I think the feeling that's happening nationally is that the talking needs to stop and people need to be held account. And accountability also is shown through action. So it's not just about people sitting on panels saying that this is what things look like, this is the way that things are supposed to be. It's all about action, and change is demonstrated through action. And I would like to think that the contributions from the panelists this evening are helping shape some of those thoughts and feelings from a West Midlands perspective on what that change ultimately looks like. So David, I want to bring you in at this particular point, if you don't mind, because I want you to talk about your new deal for young people as it relates to some of those solutions, if you may.
This is in recognition of having large numbers of young people, and I'm talking now probably about the late teens into their 20s, young people who are going to be unemployed. There's a massive economic cost to unemployment. There's the unemployment pay, then there's all the criminality that goes with it. All that costs the nation a fortune. You add in that the cost of lost hope, mental health, and all the other things that come from not being economically active. That is a huge social and economic cost to society. Now, what I'm saying is we should be taking a lesson that we had from government in the late 90s, when we had huge unemployment for young people. I would say nowhere near as great as we're going to have in the next few months. And the New Deal gradually moved the funding from benefits and unemployment pay and moved it into encouraging employers to take people on into training, but pay them to do the job in training and actually get some sort of purposeful work. It also helped people with enterprise. I think some of the things that you've been doing, Kit, in enterprise and helping people set up their own businesses and to learn how you could actually sustain something yourself. Because not everybody wants to work for someone else. A lot of people want to do things themselves. A lot of young people that I meet say, what I want to do is start my own business in this or that. That's great. So there's that. And just one of the things I've mentioned, there are a number of things I've mentioned in my paper, which is on my website for those who want to have a look at it. But we've got a green revolution taking place in this in the world, but in this country we had 2 weeks when we were no longer dependent on coal for powering our electricity. The first time probably in over 100 years that's actually happened. The polluting atmosphere that we have. Why don't we guess, particularly in the Midlands, we got we're a place that does things, makes things. In Coventry, Black Country, Wolverhampton, Birmingham, we've got manufacturing. Why don't we now get some of the investment, instead of investing in failure and people not working, why don't we invest instead in some of those new green industries? It'll create the jobs. Some may be craft jobs, some may be science jobs. There'll be jobs at all levels for people. But you know what it will do? It'll harness that enthusiasm of so many young people that want to see not just a better Britain, they want to see a better world, and they want to see a greener world. And that will harness the energies of those young people to create that better world. And it'll have also an international effect in that this country will be less dependent on our energy supplies from unstable, politically and economically unstable countries in other parts of the world.
Thank you for that, David. And as we approach the end now, one of the things I want to do now is kind of get some concluding points from the panel. I want you to just be honest, take away your notes. Some of you, I can see you writing notes. I think this is the lecturer in me. I can see people are writing notes. I want you to put the notes to the side for a moment. And I just want you to kind of give me your heart and your thoughts whilst we conclude by telling me or discussing to our audience if there's just kind of one point that you want to share. Doesn't have to be professional. But if there's just one point that you want to share as we conclude, what would it be? So I'm going to give a few seconds for you to think about that. And I believe Kit's showing me his hand. I don't know if Melvin is looking up or looking at me. So I'm going to go to you second. Then I'm going to go to George. Then I'm going to go to Mary Claire. Then I'm going to go to Cameron. And then we'll end with Paulette. So I'm going to say it again, throw away the notes. I really just want you to give us your heart and your thoughts at this moment. And if there's just one thing that you want to conclude with, what would that be? Please, again, we don't want no Prime Minister speeches. So really keep it short and succinct, because I think that when it's short and succinct, it goes straight to people's thoughts and hearts. I think sometimes when we talk too long on that one point, sometimes people forget. So I wanted to just really get straight to the point with that. So Kit, I'm going to allow you to go first.
Cool, thank you. I can't promise I won't do a Prime Minister one, but I'm going to try a Deputy Prime Minister, only because I'm going to try and sync everything together. Longest story short, COVID-19 has shown us that when people want to commission quickly, it can happen. So the things that I've seen happen and all the different kind of levels, and remember, I'm talking as a person that's really trying to help smaller organizations get into the room. So I'm trying to teach them about how many people you got on a board, all of these rules in order for you to get some money. COVID-19 comes and a lot of that stuff lifts. So there's evidence to say that actually if we pardon my French, give a damn enough, we're going to make things happen, right? So that speed is needed. And again, this is somebody who works with a lot of different local authorities. Like when things move quickly, you can address issues at that point, because in 24 hours, anything can happen to the young people I work with. And then linking with that, conversations about identity, we need to let them happen. We can't hide them away. But we need to allow the fact that there's lots of different ideas, and your objective in any discussion is not to win. It's to hear where people are coming from, and then maybe another day have the same conversation. Because the truth in behavioral psychology is it takes time for people to evolve, and it takes time for things and ideas to form. And I think sometimes we think that we've got to, one, do an intervention first time and it's got to work, and two, we think that everybody's got to always agree with where we're coming from. But actually, discussion and conversation means there's version 1, version 2, version 3, and we have to evolve. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Malvin, if you can go next.
I think for me, from this meeting, I just want us to be able to make a change. Instead of just having this meeting now, we all just go back to what we're doing as normal. Like, I want to see progress. I want us all to go back.
Sorry, Melvin, you've gone for a moment. Can't hear you, sir. Melvin, we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, geez. Hello?
Yeah, I think what you was alluding to is that you don't want this to just be a conversation and everything goes back to...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah. As I was saying, yeah, I just want everyone to be able to go back and process what's happened today. I go back and try to make the difference between ourselves and see what we can do.
I think Malvin's gone again. I think I kind of understood what he was saying. I think what he was ultimately saying was that we don't want to just have this conversation and then whilst things start to settle down nationally or globally, everybody just goes back to normal, which I believe he was trying to say. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did I say George was next? Correct. Yeah, I'm doing this well tonight. Yeah. So George, go on.
Yeah. So I think all I really want to say is, like, young people deserve more than what we're currently doing. We need to create an environment where young people know their identity and they feel a sense of belonging. And I think for all of us, sat on this panel, a work capacity and a professional capacity, it's great, like, that we do it, but like, let's echo that through all walks of our lives as well, and make sure that we're living by everything we're saying.
I love that one, short and sweet. Thank you. I believe, did I say Marie Claire's next? Yeah, I'm gonna go with Marie Claire, and then we're gonna go to Cameron and end with Paulette.
Yeah, so I think all rules are out the window at the moment, aren't they? We've gone from one sort of catastrophic event to other things that make us really uncomfortable. But what that gives us the opportunity to do, and what we're seeing, is really innovative solutions, like Kit was saying about the speedy commissioning. We've never seen anything like it in the sector. And I think it's the time now to be innovative, to come up with different mechanisms even. So one of the things that we're developing, and we're at the very end stages of, is a co-op model. Now, Italy's 50% of their public services are run by co-ops, people that work for a company, but also have ownership stakes in it, and profit from the productivity and things like that. So really passionate about developing democratic mechanisms that help people to access the tangible opportunities that we've all been talking about, and the leadership opportunities that we know are so important. So yeah, I feel like I've come out of the bereft phase that I was feeling because of what's going on and how upsetting it's been to witness. But actually, I'm feeling quite excited now. I think that we're seeing change happen across the globe. We're seeing Minneapolis State Department defund the police department because it's totally non-credible. We're seeing statues of slave traders torn down. We're in an exciting time, and we need to be brave and fight the good fight. And as George just said, we just need to do better.
Thank you for that, Marie Claire. Cameron?
Yeah, Craig. Yeah, I won't do a Prime Minister. I'll do a Dalai Lama on you. So, I mean, everyone said what I wanted to say. But in Birmingham, we're a very diverse region, and with diverse areas come with diverse range of views, and we all have differences, and being united in differences is what brings us together. So I just want us to reflect on two words, which is tolerance and compassion. I'll just leave it at that and let everyone just think about that.
Excellent, thank you, Cameron. I want to end with Paulette, if you don't mind closing the comments for the panel.
Yeah, Craig, I had the opportunity to sit down and listen to everybody else, and I'm one of the older ones on the panel, but I actually believe we are all custodians for the next generation. And if we don't learn to bring them along with us and allow them to go past us, because any of you that are parents, you don't just want your children to do as well as you've done, you want them to do better. So if we do not play our part as the custodians for the future, they'll do it anyway, but they won't do it in a way that any of us will expect them to do it, because there are some very bright young people coming through. It doesn't matter what color, black, white, Asian, Chinese, very bright, and they are not going to put up with the way that past generations have done it. They want change, and they want it now. Thank you.
And I would just like to say thank you for all the panelists that have really stuck to my rules, which is brilliant. I was nervous coming into this one thinking it's going to be hard because, you know, I know how Kit talks, I know how Paulette goes, and Cameron talks as well. We're all talkers, which is a good thing. So thank you for allowing me to chair this meeting on behalf of the PCC. And I think, you know, just moving forward, I think we are all passionate about young people, and there's going to be people tuned in tonight that share our hearts and our temperament, but it can't be just a conversation that we're just having and don't create an action point for ultimately what's next. And I think, you know, just kind of concluding just where I'm at, you know, I'm still sad, I'm still angry, you know, I have a roller coaster of emotions around these particular issues because we care. And I think, you know, Marie Claire or George may have mentioned the point about hope. And I think that's what it is. You know, our young people are looking at us, depending on them, but we're also depending on our young people as well to give us fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. Because it's not just about us sitting around the table on a panel, you know, talking as adults, but not really introducing or connecting our thoughts and our ideas to the lens of where young people are right now. So I think just to conclude, I think it makes perfect sense that David ends the conversation today, and then that will be us for the night. Just to make people know that if people have missed it, it will be on YouTube to circulate. And again, this is just the beginning of a conversation. This is not a conversation tonight where we were expecting some massive strategic plan, but really kind of to just share some of the ideas and thoughts of individuals dotted around the West Midlands that are experiencing a series of issues around the children, young people and families that they work with, and really to kind of just express where we hopefully intend to go next. So David, I want to bring you back in. I'd like to say thank you again to everybody for allowing me to be the chair. And I believe this is me for the night, and I'm not going to do no more talking. Night, everybody.
Yeah. Craig, thank you very much indeed. I detected tonight a number of people have used the word anger. You can use anger to destroy and tear things down, or you can use anger to actually start getting change and getting things done. And I would hope that that anger is will turn into positive activity to really make a change. I haven't lost my appetite for change. I came into politics about 50 years ago when I was first elected to a position, and I wanted change then, and I want it now. And much of the change that we wanted, many of the things, the change we wanted, have happened. And our society has changed for the better, but we've got a long way to go. I think that's where we're at. And I'm actually, like you, Marie Claire, I'm actually optimistic about the future. And I think when something dreadful happens like this coronavirus crisis, what you do is, yes, you deal with the crisis, but it's always good in a crisis to say to yourself, okay, those are the bad things, but what's the good things we can get out of this? What's the learning we can do? How can we actually change things? And I think we hit a moment now where many in society want something different. They want their life to be different. They want the opportunities to be different. What I'd like to do, you're right, Craig, we haven't put the whole world right tonight, and we won't in that period of time, but I think we've aired some of the issues. Melvin, are you still on the line? I don't know if he is. What I'll do is I think the point you made, Cameron, was right. Let's hear some of the young voices. What I will look at is with my youth commissioners, not just my youth commissioners, but perhaps get an audience of a panel of young people who actually express their feelings directly, and we'll get one of them to chair it, and we'll do the same thing as we've done today. But I think as well we need to perhaps do this again, perhaps have one or two different people on the panel, perhaps, and eventually I'd like to bring in, if we can, some live questions from outside when that's possible. I know that's quite difficult to do in an organised way, but I'll attempt to do that as well, and we'll do our very best to facilitate that. This has been a good session this evening, and it's met more than the expectations that I had of tonight. And I want to thank all the panelists and all those who have been listening in. One or two have been sending me text messages as we've been talking. So thank all those who have been listening in. And I hope then, if people have ideas, they express them to us, bring them forward, so we can put those ideas perhaps into another forum in the not too distant future, where we take some of the issues to the next steps. So thank you, panelists, very much indeed. Craig, thank you very much for being a blooming excellent chairman of our session. I'm glad you were doing it, not me. Yes, I'm going to show how modern I am. I'm going to press I got a little clap. Look, there we are. That's a clap for you, Craig. So thank you all very much. And